Specifically the one that is seen in the individual in the black and white jacket.
Correct.
Did you recognize the individual that got into the back seat on the left side, the rear driver's side?
Yes.
And who was that individual?
Jamel.
And Jamel, is that the defendant, Jamel Demons?
Yes, ma'am.
My determination was that this is not a drive-by shooting. Shooter's at a stationary position when all but one of these rounds are going in. It was enough time for the heart to stop beating, for there to be no circulation due to the wounds that I examined from the medical examiner's office. None of the wounds have any blood in them, which tells me that they're all ante-mortem wounds.
New footage just hit the internet, and it's flipping the whole YNW Melly situation upside down. What really went down that night is way messier than people thought. And now the streets are buzzing again. Before those unalivings that shocked everybody, Melly and Bortlen were caught on cam. And folks are saying this clip might change the whole narrative. Let me break down why prosecutors swear they got Melly cornered. Ever since Bortlen's plea deal had the whole scene whispering, people started digging into the evidence the state been sitting on for years. And when you see how they line this stuff up, you get why Melly's team been acting like the walls are closing in on them.
This is the actual crime scene on US 27 Pembroke Road.
And approximately where along Pembroke Road on this map were those casings discovered? Specifically the one that is seen in the individual in the black and white jacket.
Correct.
Did Mr. Henry have possession of either of those satchels or man purses at the hospital?
No, ma'am.
This is huge. And this is one of the biggest nightmares that any prosecutor could face, where you're getting taken off the case and now being called as a witness in said case.
The feds pulled up with 7 major pieces of evidence they claim prove Melly turned on his own day ones. Each one built to crush that old drive-by story and paint a picture of Melly sitting in that back seat with that piece in his hand. But the wildest part, that surveillance footage. Cameras at New Era recording studios caught Melly, Bortlen, Sack Chaser, and Juvie all moving together around 4:09 a.m., October 26, 2018.
So theoretically, Phillips said Bortlen could now be called as a witness in Melly's upcoming trial. He could testify for Melly or against Melly. But my guess is if he's agreeing to do a proffer, he's going to snitch. I expect that to be the case, Phillips said. If they subpoena him, he can no longer take the Fifth Amendment on these issues.
But it ain't just them walking out the building. It's where Melly slid into the car that got prosecutors talking crazy. During trial, the victim's mother had to sit there and identify her child on screen, and the whole room felt that pain. The video shows Melly getting into the left rear seat, the exact spot where ballistics experts say the fatal shots came from. That one clip alone had the courtroom locked in because it wiped out the defense's whole claim that Melly wasn't even inside the car when everything went down. And the forensic work? Prosecutors say it tells a story nobody can twist. Investigators found 0 signs that shots came from outside the car. No shattered angles, no random impact marks, nothing that would match a drive-by.
You guys are so criminal-minded and caught up into this street culture where black people aren't even smart anymore. They think everybody dumb.
At the end of the day, Mr. Henry knows what happened. He was in the car, but he wasn't the shooter. And so finally, after all these years, for him to plead no contest, even though he was adjudicated guilty and accepted responsibility for this, in part, was favorable.
No bullet holes from the passenger side where a real drive-by would have lit that car up. It's looking messy. The defense tried to flip the script, claiming that driver's side window shattered from the inside out, but that move backfired fast. Crime scene reconstruction expert Sergeant Christopher Williams hit the stand and dropped testimony that had the courtroom frozen. He laid out how the trajectory showed every fatal shot came from the same exact area where Melly was sitting, not from some mystery shooter outside the car. And when he broke down the timing of the wounds, things got even uglier. Williams explained that they knew both victims were already gone before that fake drive-by was staged. According to the evidence, Sack Chaser and Juvie weren't alive during that outside-the-car shooting scene, meaning the whole thing was a setup after the fact.
All right, Mr. Henry, I'm not quite sure how your lawyers managed to do this, but I wish you good luck, sir. So the free forms to me look like on the 19th case as to the 2 counts of accessory after the fact, as well as to all 4 counts in the 23 case. These are going to be adjudications. 10 years Florida State Prison, followed by, that's a 6 years probation.
That's cold, calculated behavior, no question. Then the DNA hit the story even harder. Melly's DNA was all over the left rear door handle, the same spot investigators say the shooter sat. The defense tried brushing it off, saying it only proved he was in the Jeep at some point. But when you match that with the surveillance footage, prosecutors say the picture gets way too clear. But here's the twist. They didn't find any gunshot residue on Melly's hands, something the defense keeps shouting about as proof he didn't fire anything. Prosecutors fired back, saying that gap of time before testing makes residue useless, so it proves nothing. And honestly, that argument had the jury side-eyeing both sides. Then the tech evidence came sliding in like a hammer. Melly's phone pinged right near the homicide location, putting him exactly where he later claimed he wasn't. And the craziest part?
He goes and he testifies, or talks to the prosecutor in a proffer. His lawyer's there, the agents on the case are there, the prosecutor's there. They ask him whatever they want, right? And nothing he says can be held against him in that proffer. Nothing. And this is what they call a snitch session.
When someone asked him about the unalivings online and he replied, "I did that." Prosecutors say that looks like a digital confession, even if he meant it another way. One of the wildest twists in this whole case is what happened to the supposed homicide weapons. Detective Polo testified that several items mysteriously vanished. Surveillance footage shows Melly and Bortlen walking out the studio with bags while the victims followed behind. But when Bortlen showed up at the hospital with the bodies, those bags were gone like smoke. Legal experts been saying those missing bags probably held the homicide weapons, and the fact they vanished without a trace makes the whole thing look like some organized crime level cleanup.
I hope they get his kid life. I hope he never gets out of prison. Yeah. He killed his friends.
The prosecution pushed hard to explain why Melly would allegedly turn on his own circle. And gang expert Danny Polo told the court that Melly had ties to the Signed Bloods, claiming that taking out Sack Chaser and Juvie could have boosted his pockets and his status in the set. Text messages between the crew showed real tension bubbling before the unalivings, especially with Sack Chaser feeling like Melly was getting all the spotlight while he was doing the real work behind the scenes. Money and respect. Two things that have torn apart more crews than anything else out here. Things got even crazier when those texts showed Sack Chaser beefing with Melly's mom about business moves in the hood.
Yeah, I think that it's important. And, this is a homicide case. This is a high stakes case. There's integrity in the prosecution of this case because this family does deserve justice. And there isn't a person that deserves to be wrongfully convicted or in prison for something that they didn't do.
I look like taking the deal that hurt my... I look like giving a... How y'all feel? I'm a young fly. Be back to raising hell, prevail.
When someone starts disrespecting your family, situations can turn bad fast. And that's exactly the angle prosecutors are pushing. That after Melly allegedly handled his boys inside the SUV, him and Bortlen drove somewhere else and shot up the outside of the vehicle to fake a drive-by. But the forensic evidence called their bluff instantly. Blood spatter patterns and bullet paths made no sense for a real drive-by. And investigators noticed there were 0 bullet holes on the right side of the car, the side that should have been lit up in a real hit. Then things got even more suspicious when the hospital footage came out. Security cameras caught Bortlen switching clothes as soon as he got to the ER, like he was trying to ditch evidence. Staff said he was acting confused and kept switching up his story about what happened and what made it super questionable. Melly didn't even show up at the hospital, even though the 2 victims were supposed to be his closest people. If your day ones just got hit and you really ride for them, wouldn't you be right there trying to see if they were still breathing? One of the most heated parts of the whole case is the prosecution trying to use Melly's own lyrics against him.
No. His attorney said no, he will not testify. The only thing that's going to happen based on what his attorney said is he only got to answer a couple questions from the state and then he got to go serve his time. And
they want to bring in bars from Murder on My Mind and other tracks as proof of his mindset. At first, they tried to bring in over 100 songs, but the appeals court is still fighting over whether those lyrics can even be used. This piece alone has everybody debating like crazy. Prosecutors also trying to bring in a promo video as evidence, but that's still tied up in appeals. The whole debate about whether rap, visuals, and creative expression can be used in court is something the legal world still hasn't figured out. And this case is pushing that argument to the edge. Even with all that, Melly's defense keeps saying the state's whole case is stacked on assumptions and sloppy police work. They point to the missing homicide weapons, the lack of gunshot residue on Melly, and claims of police misconduct throughout the investigation. They also brought up how Detective Mark Moretti admitted he threatened witnesses with deportation and jail time, which makes everybody question whether any of those statements can even be trusted. But here's the twist. Once Bortlen took that plea deal and admitted the unalivings happened inside the SUV and that he helped stage the scene, the defense's job turned into a straight uphill climb. They can't push the drive-by story anymore. They can't say nothing happened. Now they gotta convince the jury that Melly didn't pull the trigger. And that's a tough sell when all this other evidence is pointing right at him. The street's been waiting on answers since 2018, and this whole evidence pack is why prosecutors swear they finally got their guy. But having evidence is one thing. Convincing a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, especially in a case this messy, is a whole different mission. That's where the defense was gearing up for their most desperate play to keep their client from getting buried by this case.
That YNW Bortlen is not going to be a flipper, and he is not going to be the cheese eater I previously said that he could become. And he is going to give a statement. I don't know what that statement's going to be, but his attorney is an excellent attorney. He's one of my good friends and really helped me out as a young attorney. Fred Haddad, a great guy. And he represented very, very few, if any, flippers in the past.
As the retrial approached, Melly's legal team found themselves in what you could call a full-blown nightmare scenario. Bortlen's plea deal basically confirmed the unalivings happened inside the whip, and that he helped cover it up, forcing the entire defense strategy to get flipped upside down. And what happened next exposed real cracks in both camps, prosecution and defense, showing how chaotic this whole situation got behind the scenes. From the jump, Melly's defense strategy been causing drama all through the hip-hop world. Back in the 2023 trial, defense attorney David Howard straight up pointed the finger at Bortlen for the crimes. He told the jury, those were Bortlen's lies, saying Bortlen lied about where it happened, lied about how it happened, and lied about not having the phone. That move had folks in the streets saying it felt like straight snitching on someone tied to their own client's case. Social media went crazy, calling out how Melly's defense pushed everything onto his co-defendant in the first trial. Comments were flying like, YNW Melly and his defense put all the blame on Bortlen last time, so technically they both told. And think about Melly's lawyer's opening statements. He tried to make YNW Bortlen the shooter. No way Bortlen don't turn state. The internet wasn't letting anybody slide. The defense tried to build their whole strategy around a few key points that had everybody arguing. Howard kept stressing that Bortlen tested positive for gunshot residue while Melly didn't, and they claimed that proved Bortlen was the one who actually fired the shots. To them, that was the biggest piece showing their client wasn't the trigger man. They only called one witness, Melly's homeboy Adrian A.D. Davis, who said Melly was knocked out at the house when everything went down. Davis claimed he found out about the homicides at the exact same time Melly did, and said Melly was chilling in shorts and a t-shirt when the news hit. The defense went straight at law enforcement too, saying Detective Mark Moretti was obsessed with pinning this on Melly because of his fame and his rep. They reminded the jury that Moretti admitted threatening witnesses with jail and deportation, which made the whole investigation look shaky to people in the streets. But the drama didn't stop there. The prosecution got rocked by its own scandal. Lead prosecutor Christine Bradley was removed from the case after accusations that she hid evidence from the defense. The issue centered around a police witness who allegedly asked another officer to lie about being present during a search warrant. Legal expert Melba Pearson explained how massive this was. The defense argued Bradley needed to be taken off the case so they could call her as a witness to expose the detective who tried to push false testimony. With Bradley gone, replacement prosecutors had to learn 5 years of complex case files with barely any time before the retrial. Meanwhile, the defense was crumbling too. In August 2025, Melly fired his old lawyers in the middle of a prosecutor investigation into possible witness tampering. His new squad, Kerry Hua and Drew Finland, walked straight into chaos, taking over a case that got 10 times more complicated after Bortlen's plea deal. Reports say Melly claimed a lawyer switch happened because of prosecutorial interference, but the exact details behind why his legal team got dropped still aren't clear to anyone in the streets. And once Bortlen was no longer a co-defendant, the defense lost one of their biggest strategic advantages, because now they couldn't just point the finger at him the same way anymore. Defense attorney Bradford Cohen broke down what all this meant to people in the streets, and the whole situation started looking even heavier. Through all this legal chaos, the families of Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr. have been waiting almost 7 long years for closure. Attorney John M. Phillips, who represents Christopher Thomas's family, been juggling both the criminal and civil cases at the same time, and he explained how the family viewed Bortlen's plea deal. The civil side brings a whole new angle, because Bortlen's plea deal means he can't plead the fifth in civil depositions anymore. That opens the door for more questions, more details, and possibly more truth about what really went down on October 26, 2018. In the streets, that's the kind of shift that can change the whole tone of a case. This case also exposed deep tension in hip-hop around loyalty, fame, and what street credibility even means today. Charleston White and other voices came out swinging with harsh takes on how the culture responds when big-name artists get tied into serious charges. They argued fans ride for celebs, even when the evidence is sitting right there, and it sparked debates all over social media and the hood. And after all these years, the core evidence still ain't budged. The surveillance footage still shows Melly hopping into the shooter's seat. The ballistics still ended the drive-by story. The phone data still places Melly right there at the scene. None of that changed. What did change was the courtroom landscape surrounding it. With Bortlen's plea confirming the unalivings went down inside the car, the defense can't argue no crime happened anymore, and they can't keep pushing that old drive-by tale either. And when your day one flips on the official record, that's when situations get real messy real fast. I'm not exaggerating. This whole Melly saga took a wild left turn overnight. September 9th, 2025 became one of the most shocking days in this entire case. Bortlen walked into that Broward County courtroom and took a plea deal that had everybody, lawyers, fans, even people who barely follow the case, completely stunned. Reports say Judge Michael Usen looked straight up confused, telling Bortlen he couldn't understand how his lawyers managed to land him such a sweet deal. This wasn't some regular plea either. This was a man originally facing life or possibly even the chair for 2 first-degree homicide charges. And somehow, he walked out with 10 years and 6 years probation. Nobody in the courthouse or the streets saw that coming. That right there is what people call finessing the system on a whole different tier. For years, both Melly and Bortlen stood solid, holding the same line, claiming they were innocent. Melly's first trial in 2023 ended with a hung jury. 9 said not guilty, 3 said guilty, and the retrial got pushed to January 2027, so his team could rebuild their whole strategy. Then September 9th came along and blew everything up. The vibe inside the courtroom was honestly sad. Only about 8 people pulled up to support Bortlen, including Melly's mom and little brother. No 100K track. No familiar faces from Juvies or Sack Chasers families. The whole room felt like abandonment energy, straight up. The plea deal itself was simple but serious. Bortlen pled to accessory after the fact and witness tampering, and in exchange, the homicide charges that could have had him locked for life were dropped. But here's where things got spicy. The plea came with a proffer agreement, meaning the feds wanted Bortlen to sit down and talk. And anytime the streets hear proffer, they start thinking someone's about to spill something. Defense attorney Bruce Rivers broke it down in street terms, saying the government wasn't just letting him walk with a slap on the wrist for nothing. Attorney John M. Phillips, who reps one of the victims' families, said if Bortlen agreed to talk even a little, prosecutors might finally get the missing details they needed to tighten the case on Melly for good. But Bortlen's lawyer, Fred Haddad, came out swinging against that snitch narrative. The man went on record saying, "I don't represent snitches," and insisted Bortlen wasn't about to throw Melly under the bus. He said the proffer would be limited and that his client wasn't testifying in court against anybody. That statement had everyone even more confused. People online and in the hood were split. Some called it snitching. Others said it was survival mode. Reporter Saidu Nash, who was actually inside the courtroom, came through with clearer insight. Nash's reporting suggested the cooperation was minimal, and wasn't putting Melly in any immediate threat, which went completely against what the early street rumors were saying about Bortlen turning full informant. But the timing? That's what made everybody stare. They had 250 potential jurors lined up to show the very next morning, and the county had already poured a bag into preparing for this trial. So for Bortlen to flip at the last second like that, it had people thinking one of two things. Either his lawyers panicked, or the prosecution slid him a deal so sweet it couldn't be refused. The moment that really shook the streets came right after everything wrapped up. The day after his sentencing, Bortlen hopped on a jail phone and dropped a whole freestyle addressing the snitch rumors. And that clip had the entire internet going crazy. The freestyle was his way of telling the streets he didn't flip on his people, even if the deal he took had some folks calling it betrayal. He was basically saying he did what he had to do to survive the system, but he wasn't about to help put his boy on death row. That was his message, loud, raw, and straight from a jail phone. A few days later, Bortlen got shipped off to state prison, where they shaved off his dreads and processed him like any other inmate. Going from rising rap talent to state property hits different. That's the kind of reality check that can change how any young hustler looks at life. But DJ Academics came through with a whole different angle that had the hip-hop world thinking way deeper about what this deal really meant for Melly. AK pointed out something major that a lot of people in the hood weren't paying attention to. Even without snitching or testifying, Bortlen's plea basically confirms the homicides happened inside the SUV, and that he helped cover it up. That one detail alone might crush the defense's old drive-by narrative, the same story both of them used to claim innocence. So even if Bortlen didn't say Melly pulled the trigger, the plea still moved the ground under Melly's case. The hip-hop community didn't know how to take all this. In a culture where snitching is treated like the ultimate disrespect, people were stuck trying to decide if Bortlen broke the code, or if he was just doing what anybody would do when the system cornered them. Some folks said he stayed solid, others said he folded. The debates were wild. And of course, Charleston White threw gasoline on everything with his usual brutally direct takes. He came out saying he killed his friends, representing a part of the community that believes if someone really took out their own people, fame, talent, and reputation shouldn't save them. His version of the truth rubbed a lot of folks the wrong way, but others said he was just saying what nobody else wanted to say out loud. With Bortlen no longer sitting beside Melly as a co-defendant, and possibly providing some level of cooperation to prosecutors, this plea deal marked a huge shift in a case that's kept hip-hop locked in since 2018. Melly's defense team suddenly found themselves dealing with a whole new kind of pressure from the state. His retrial, now pushed to January 2027, got delayed again because the appeals court still has to decide whether certain tech evidence can even be used. Prosecutors want to bring in digital data to prove alleged motives, possible gang ties, and Melly's mindset. But until the appeals court rules on it, everything's stuck in limbo. These delays are creating major challenges for everybody involved. The new prosecutors got to dig through thousands of pages of transcripts, exhibits, and testimony from the first trial, trying to understand years of complicated details. Meanwhile, Melly's new legal team has to rebuild their entire game plan now that Bortlen's status changed and the old drive-by narrative is in the water. And even with all this back and forth, the real stakes never changed. Melly is still facing 2 counts of first-degree homicide, and the death penalty is still on the table. Under Florida's updated death penalty law, prosecutors only need 8 jurors to agree on execution, not all 12, meaning the danger for Melly is even higher now. In the streets, the debate around justice in this case hits way deeper than courtroom rules. For the families of Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr., justice means accountability. Someone taking responsibility for their son's passings. For Melly's supporters, justice means making sure a man they believe is innocent doesn't get executed over charges they say don't add up. And for the broader community, justice means a fair trial. One grounded in facts, not fame, not hype, not emotion. Legal expert Safa Robinson-Farah stressed how important it is for the system to get this right, especially with how many eyes are on this case. 2 young men lost their lives on October 26, 2018. 2 families been grieving ever since. Bortlen is set to spend years behind bars for admitting he helped cover up those crimes. And Melly, depending on how this plays out, could be facing execution if convicted. Whether justice is truly served will all depend on how the retrial unfolds with new prosecutors, new attorneys, and a completely shifted legal battlefield. The The 2027 trial is shaping up to look completely different from that 2023 mice trial, but the biggest questions still hit the streets the same way. What really went down on October 26, 2018? Who actually pulled the trigger that ended 2 young lives? And is the justice system finally going to bring real closure to the families while making sure the right person is held accountable? These are the questions everybody's been waiting to see answered, and the whole hood knows the truth can't stay buried forever. But all those answers gotta wait until January 2027, when YNW Melly steps back into court and faces everything once again. It's been nearly a decade of rumors, evidence drops, court drama, and street debates. And now it's all coming down to this moment. If you rocked with this breakdown, drop a comment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and I'll see you on the next one.